Going on a cruise today, whether it's Royal Caribbean or really any other line, has changed a lot over the years. No doubt about that. And as we always like to in this episode of the podcast, we like to look back sometimes and kind of reflect on how things have changed. And I thought this is actually a really good opportunity because our good friends over at Cruise Critic are actually celebrating their 30th anniversary. 30 is a big number, and it also coincides with, of course, a lot of changes in the cruise industry along the way. So I wanted to talk about maybe some things we've seen over the years, kind of covering the cruise industry. And to join me on today's episode is Gray Faust from Cruise Critic. Chris, welcome back to the Royal Caribbean Blog Podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me on. It's always fun.
Absolutely. And, first of all, congratulations on 30 years Cruise Critic. I don't think you were there for all 30 years, but congratulations to the company on 30 years for the for all that hard work. I mean, that's a lot of coverage over the years. How many years have you been at Cruise Critic?
I've been there for only 12 years, so I appreciate, 30 years. We like to say 30 years on the internet is like 100 in real life, right? So, yeah, I mean, Cruise Critic started as an AOL chat room for people that might remember the days of dial-up. So really, everything's come a long way since then. That's for sure.
Heck yeah. And by the same token, the manner in which we cruise today has changed a lot over those 30 years. I got started cruising in the late 90s or literally the early 2000s was kind of when I really got my feet wet with it. And we've all seen changes. Heck, we've seen changes in the last 5 years, right? Going back to, pre-COVID versus post-COVID. But it's incredible to think about, and I got to give full credit. The Cruise Critic team came up with some interesting data, kind of talking about some of these hot topics over these past 3 decades that have really changed a lot. And some things have changed a lot. Some are actually, I think, maybe more or less the same, but we'll talk about all that. But it's really interesting, Chris, to look at how sometimes it's like the more things change, the more they stay the same. And in some cases, it is fundamentally different. And we have a lot of different topics to talk about how cruising has changed over 30 years. So before we get started with this, talk to us quickly about your methodology in terms of how you kind of summed up this data, if you will.
We did a survey of our members on the boards, and we really looked at what people were concerned about back then, and what people were writing about back then, and what they're really concerned about right now. And really, the thing about Cruise Critic is we have our members, and they really are the heart of the site, and they are always there to keep us honest, right? And whenever anything's going on, I mean, some of these topics again have always been ones that have been hot topics, but certainly again the cruisers on our sites have been cruising the entire time, and there's always new people coming in, of course, to cruising, but our folks have been there through the whole thing. So surveying them and what has really been on their minds the whole time and the changes that they've seen, that's really the best way to get at the heart of, they've seen it all, they've lived it all, and that's how we get into this.
Absolutely. So let's start off with, we're going to go right down the list here. Let's start with tipping. Gratuities are, I am sure, I know they're a very hot button topic today, and I'm sure they were a hot button topic back in the day. But talk to us about tipping and kind of where you see today versus 30 years ago.
Well, the old days of tipping, and I remember I went on my first cruise in about 1997, so not quite 30 years ago, but close enough.
Yep.
And back then, the envelope to the waiter at the end of your cruise, you had the same waiter the entire time, and your stewards, that was really the only way that tipping kind of came. It was very personal. It was very much like, and also very, optional in a lot of ways. Like you tipped directly, that sort of thing. And of course, the auto gratuities is the new norm now on ships. And the fact that that makes it more standardized, it makes it a little bit more fair. The cruise lines like it because it also, those auto gratuities also go to the people behind the scenes that people don't always see.
Yep.
And also, it just kind of goes, the way that people spend their time on board is a lot different than it used to be. So really, tipping's the heart of it. I mean, back then the ships were so much smaller. People would always just go to there's maybe one or two bars on board. If you wanted to tip one bartender, you'd see them all the time. Now these ships are like cities on the sea or resorts at sea. You might, if you go into one bar one night, you might never go to it again, So and same with dining, you wouldn't have the same waiter every single night. So this way of auto gratuities is really more fair, to the staff. and I think evens it out. And it also shows that cruising has become so much more international in that tipping practices can really differ from country to country, nationality to nationality. And these cruise ships now are getting people from all over the world. So having a more standardized tipping practice is definitely something that it came about for those reasons, that just the way that people cruise is different and who is on board has changed.
Yeah, I mean, this is actually a change. So I know there's a hot debate about the auto gratuity. I will simply say this. The old method was not great. Like those envelopes, if you never did that before, you would get, like Chris said, you got three envelopes. It would be for at least on Royal Caribbean, it was the stateroom attendant, your waiter, and then the head waiter, right? Maybe there actually was a fourth or the assistant waiter, but I digress. The point was you had to you had to get cash, put it in the envelope, and then you had to give it to them, and it was always awkward, Chris. It felt like a mafia payoff, like a like you kind of like you did the old handshake where like the envelope was in your hand. Like I mean, it was so like contrived. Is that the right word? I don't know.
It
It was
was
always awkward. Yeah,
it
it
was
was.
really stressful, and like I mean, again, the first time I cruised was with my dad, and of course, like he could pull off that kind of suave move because that was just what men of that generation did, but like it's not something that's modern. I we still see people get stressed out about tipping. Having the auto gratuity where it's laid out for you is just a lot easier. And also remember, back then people carried a lot more cash. We didn't have a chip society like we do now, or where you can just tap your card. I never carry cash, to be honest. So like for me to have to get cash for tips, that would mean another trip to the bank. It just isn't something. It's not a practice that really is part of our modern society anymore.
Absolutely, I agree 100%. I mean, I do think I still wish for a day that gratuity is just part of the cruise fare. Like it's already basically is with the auto gratuity, but just make it like a line item there. But that's a different discussion for a different day. I will say, I think we're better off with auto gratuity in the sense that it's less awkward. But I do understand some people have issues with like they prefer the more, people take umbrage with the idea that like, well, I want to tip for the service that I get and that sort of thing. But I feel like that's a whole nother ball of yarn to tackle, certainly.
I always just think of the people behind the scenes that you never see,
Like,
And if you're ever lucky enough to do a tour of, do one of those behind the scenes tours of Icon or one of the Oasis class ships, you really get a sense of for all the people that you actually interact with on board, there are so many others that you don't see that are making your vacation as awesome as it can be. So, I understand when people want to, tip the people who are right in front of them and who they've had a direct, connection with. But there are just so many people behind the scenes that you just never think of.
let's move on to number two, chair hogs. This is an interesting topic because do you think chair hogs have really changed in 30 years?
I think this is something that has always been the same.
Okay, good.
I feel like this is something that, this is human nature, I feel. So I don't know if you're gonna fight that. I do think that's what's different about it is that people are talking about it a lot more for sure. And that the cruise lines have at least instituted some signage around the pools, usually saying that, hey, if your chair is empty for 30 minutes or more, we might come around and take your belongings, so that someone else has a chance to sit. That being said, I'm not sure they always do it in practice, but there is signage at least. But I do still see that people get up at 7 in the morning to reserve lounges. I definitely don't think that's something that's. I think in the next 30 years, people will be complaining about the exact same thing.
I think it's a universal resort problem. If you go to a resort on land, you're gonna have chair hogs are a major problem over there, let alone on cruise ships. So I agree with you. I don't think it's gotten any better or worse. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I feel like on the Icon class ships, it's gotten a little bit better just because the amount of seating has just kind of like I think has been a nice change. But I do agree that it was a problem back then. It's a problem now, and there is more signage. But it seems like at least on Royal Caribbean, they don't really enforce the rule. They don't really actually, with very few exceptions, it seems like it's more of a just like, please don't do this. But we're actually not gonna, they're not gonna. They don't have the chair hog police out yet by any means.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that is kind of interesting that has arisen from this, and it's again something that some people love and some people hate, is that some cruise lines now have, private sun deck areas,
Yeah.
right? That it's kind of, I think the chair hog problem led to the rise of the different sun decks, for different classes, right? Like
Yeah.
if you're in a suite, you have that special suite sun deck area, or on Norwegian, they have the Vibe Beach Club where people will pay extra so they don't really have to deal with chair hogs.
Yeah.
It's it's proven to be another revenue model for the cruise lines, which, as we know, they're always going to find new ones. So I do think that but that definitely stems from the whole chair hog problem. Like, okay, well, maybe people will pay extra not to have to deal with this race for a chair. And yeah, so that's one thing that's definitely changed. You didn't used to see that at all.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, actually. I hadn't considered that, between the yacht club and the Haven and all these other things that have, I mean, I think you're right that it's probably the profit was the first impetus for it, but some of these ideas though are born out of this, like, hey, let's, the ship within a ship concept in general, I think is born out of that. Let's provide a less contentious, pool deck and less contentious dining experience. Just make it like easier and more of something moves in that direction. So I think you're absolutely right about that.
Yeah, I mean, they found out that people will pay for that. I
Mm.
mean, and people will, because again, we're talking about these stress points. I mean, it is stressful to run out and get a lounger. And I'm definitely not somebody who wakes up early on a cruise ship. And so there's nothing that's kind of more daunting than when you walk out to the main pool deck, no matter what ship you're on, at say like 11, and you're like, look at it, you're like, there's no seats here at all, and again, the fact that some people are in the pool, right? So then you're like, okay, well, they're probably using that chair, but some people just leave things there all day long, and you
Yeah.
know you can't use it then.
So I'm really curious where you're going to come down on this next one. Dress codes. There's no doubt dress codes have changed a lot over the years. I think we can all agree that, especially at least on a Royal Caribbean, the amount of people that get super dressed up is significantly lower than it used to be. I think the what's the word? The desire among the cruisers, like there's just generally a more casual approach to cruising in general. It's not that people don't want to get dressed up. I think that it's interesting. I feel like people don't want to wear tuxedos and ball gowns, but they are interested maybe in like theme nights, like White Night and Caribbean Night. But it definitely dress codes have changed a lot, and maybe one of the most notable or visible changes we've seen across cruise ships over 30 years. What's your take on dress codes?
Yeah, no, I mean that for sure, because I remember that my parents, when they would cruise, again back in kind of the heyday of it, or not the heyday, but like when things were more formal, my mom would go out shopping and there would be long gowns, and my dad would get his tux out and get it ready, and I mean, my husband doesn't wear it. It doesn't even have a tux, and we just live
Yeah.
differently now than we did. And I think it's across society, really. I mean, people don't dress up for a lot of things. And I think, we just aren't used to it. And I think when we go on vacation, it's not something that's considered relaxing.
Yeah.
And work, while in the work world has changed. I mean, we're working longer hours. You're not dressing up for much as work, because a lot of times work is just going to your sofa and opening your computer. That being said, you're online a lot, and that means when you go on a cruise for your vacation, the last thing you want to do is have to worry about dressing up or about having the right clothes or just the formality of it all. I just think that people that work really hard these days, that's the last thing they want to do, is think about, do I have the right clothes? Do I want to put on a suit, a tie? I mean, most people in the workplace don't wear ties anymore, and so then having to find all this stuff. I think that this is something that, I really love your point about the theme nights kind of becoming the new formal nights.
Yeah.
Because people love the theme nights. They're fun, they're energetic. You get out there is something, like particularly for a white night, when you go out and everybody's wearing white, it's really a lot of fun. And I do see that is a really good point, that is kind of the new type of dress code is what is the theme night. I just think, I mean, there will always be people that want to take a nice family portrait,
Yep.
or people that, really want to dress up. And there's cruise lines that really still lean into that. My next cruise actually is going to be on Canard, and I am definitely taking out things from my closet that I haven't seen in a while to get ready for a Canard cruise. But I just think people want more relaxation. And also, another point that we often see on our boards when people talk about the dress codes of yore is that it required a lot of suitcases to bring formal wear on a cruise. And in the back in the day, back 30 years ago, the airlines didn't charge as much for suitcases like they do now. Now there's a fee for every suitcase you want to bring. Back then there wasn't. So people kind of could fly with, several suitcases worth of formal wear. And they really can't do that now. Or if they do, they're going to have a cost. So I think that sort of the airline baggage fees kind of also sounded a little bit of the death knell for a super formal mainstream cruise.
Yeah, I
So
think you're absolutely right about that. It's interesting. And as you were talking about it, I realized it's not just Royal Caribbean. Celebrity. I remember when they went to, they no one calls it formal night anymore, right? Royal Caribbean is dress your best. Celebrity changed it to chic night. Even Silversea, when I went on them for the first time earlier this summer. I mean, I was on a 7 night cruise, so not one of their super long ones, but they didn't actually have a formal night at all. It was granted they have a more stringent dress code in general, but it seems like attitudes in general, to your point, have just changed. Like it's funny. I think at one point, maybe if we had done this episode, Chris, like in 2018 or 19, I think we would have been like, well, dress codes are gone forever. Like people are like, it's all but gone. But I really do think that people like the matching thing. It's like I think this is really born out of like the whole like Christmas pajama idea. Like people just want fun photo opportunities. So if it's Caribbean, if it's pajamas, if it's white night, like I think there is more appeal in that. Then you're absolutely right. Like let's bring the suit and the jacket and the ball gown and basically recreate senior prom. I don't think there's that appetite for that anymore, but it's just evolving.
Well, yeah, and also like, it's also what people want to wear, like a lot, cruising's getting younger too, for sure. The average age of cruising has really dropped in 30 years. It used to be around 65
Yep.
back in 1995, and now it's in the mid 40s. And a lot and younger for sure. And people want when they offer formal night, or what people would think of as a dress up night, a lot of times they want to wear something that like they would wear to the club. You know what I mean? Like kind of more club wear. You see
Yeah.
more kind of dresses like that, or just like and that kind of vibe, rather than like as you said, this kind of promy sort of situation. So, I think that's it too. What people consider being dressed up is also changed. And I think it's great. I mean, I love now the dress to impress nights because I just think you see a more variety of clothes that are kind of fun to watch. I mean, it just sort of shows that fashion's changed too.
Absolutely. All right. This next one, if you're ready for the complaints, you can email Chris at cruisecritic.com. Smoking. This is now in our notes here. This is in bold letters, ladies and gentlemen. This was the highest frustration among cruisers surveyed. And this one, I will say, I'll let you go though, because I'm the gentleman here. I'll let the guest go first. But I will say this is actually surprising to me how much smoking still remains on cruise ships today. But let's talk about smoking and how that's changed today versus 30 years ago.
Well, for sure. I mean, just looking around in society, I mean, back 30 years ago, smoking was still in a lot of places, right?
Yeah.
And now, of course, smoking is banned in almost everywhere indoors, in society. So, you know, I think people would just love that there was not any smoking at all allowed on cruise ships anymore. I mean, most of our people on our boards, this is something that they like, that there is less places to smoke, fewer places to smoke. Um, that being said, smoking is still big among international travelers. If you go on an international line, you will still see more real estate given to smokers. Casinos, some lines have gone to non-smoking casinos or added places for non-smokers in there. But there's still, if there's for a lot of the casinos, if they're adding a non-smoking area, it still is kind of off to the side.
Yep.
It's not the main area. And certainly technology's gotten a little bit better about getting out the smoke. So it's not, if you walk through, the casino, you might not like come out smelling like smoke. But it still is an issue. I mean, a lot of people out there would just like to see smoking off the ships completely. And that I think just again shows the knowledge that we have now about about smoking and just the awareness around it, around health in general, I think.
Yeah, I think smoking remains on cruise ships primarily. This is my own opinion. It's all about revenue, right? Because in the case of at least on ships that have a casino, they're tied into it. It's one of the non-smoking, or sorry, one of the smoking areas that you're allowed to go into is, of course, the casino. And there's some sort of a correlation, whether real or not, that people who gamble a lot tend to also smoke a lot, and thus that's kind of where that is born out of. I mean, Royal Caribbean and I think every cruise line now has banned smoking on their balconies many years ago, decades ago, right at this point. I'm sure you can smoke on any balcony going forward. And that's from a safety standpoint because they were always worried about, fires and whatnot. But it's interesting that smoking still remains. Again, you have that safety aspect, which is why smoking has been primarily banned in most places on cruise ships. But then you still have it holding on because I think, quite frankly, there's a revenue aspect to it.
No, I think you're exactly right. The lines, people love casinos. Casino space is actually growing on some lines. They're putting more space in for casinos. So I don't necessarily see that going away. Now, one thing that's interesting that's kind of creeping up, it wasn't in our survey, but we definitely see this popping up on our boards as a concern, is, the marijuana smoke.
Yeah.
Because people are now smelling that now that more states have legalized cannabis. And just a note here, cannabis is still considered a banned or a controlled substance under federal law, so it is not allowed on cruise ships in any shape or form. But a lot of people getting that message out to them is still, they're still not listening to it necessarily. So that is
Yep.
one complaint that we're starting to see on our boards, is that people are saying, "Hey, I'm smelling pot on the ship." People are vaping, or I can smell it.
Yeah.
Of course, that's, if you do that, you're probably going to get kicked off or banned from the cruise line. So we definitely tell people not to do that. But that is kind of, I think, the new frontier also in the whole smoking debate, that it's at least something people can smell. They don't want to, and that will continue to be a debate, I think, among cruisers.
Yeah, for sure. Let's move on to kids. I know always a interesting topic. And this one is something that, my kids grew up in this because when we started cruising with my kids when they were very young, I remember it was really, you had the kids club and like that was it. There weren't even nurseries back in my day. We didn't have nurseries on cruise ships. We just had kids club. And I remember actually babysitters where you had to go down to guest services. And if you wanted a babysitter, you had to go to guest service and say, hey, we'd like to do babysitting, which basically meant there wasn't an actual service. What they would do is they would kind of like go backstage and be like, hey, does anyone want to babysit tonight? And if you did, you'd get a crew member who would knock on your door and just hang out in your cabin with your kid, which maybe today seems a little weirder than back then. I didn't question it at all. I was like, here, good luck. See you in a couple hours. But now I feel like it's gotten so much better for parents on board. There's a flip side of that we'll get to in a second, but like the amount of venues you have nurseries now, you have many more facilities, water slides, water parks, Surfside neighborhood on the Icon class ships. I mean, parents today going on cruise ships seem to have, I think, so many more choices with it. But of course, that's also brought many more kids in general on board. Cruising has been a family thing for a while, but I feel like it's definitely moved into a different echelon. Do you agree on all that?
Yeah, I do. And again, that's talking about how the age of cruising has dropped, right? I mean, back in the day, again, most people cruising were retired. And so if they had kids in their life, they were probably grandparents, rather than actual parents, and, with small children. And so it wasn't really something that you brought your family on. I mean, honestly, my parents cruised without us. That was an adult vacation for them. We would be sent to my grandmother's house, and they would go to the Caribbean without us, or Alaska. But now, family travel is much more important, like, and people are doing cruises for family vacations in a huge way. And I just think the Icon class of Royal Caribbean is such a good example of how parents like want to interact with their children, because all those spaces, as you know, Matt, I know, all those spaces are really designed, the family spaces are designed for parents and their kids to be there together. That it isn't just that you drop your kids off in the kids club. You're really having fun on the ship together. And that is a real change, I think, in how families kind of behave on vacation, to be honest. Parents kind of, yeah, maybe they want a night where they go off to have a date night, but in general, they're looking at these cruise vacations as time to spend as a family. And that is a really great that's a great way that the cruise industry has evolved, in that now cruising is a really fantastic family vacation. It's not just something like a booze cruise or something for older adults. Like, you can go with your family and be confident that everybody in your family, from the youngest to the oldest, is going to have a great time.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting as you're talking about this, Chris. I feel like there's a really common denominator among a lot of these changes, and that is really the changing age dynamic. I mean, that probably is one of the major, if not the major factor in why so many of this has changed. I mean, remember the old saying was cruising was for the newlywed, nearly dead, and well fed, right? And and it was, retirees, honeymooners, and then some randos. But when you have a changing age mechanism now, like, I mean, Real Caribbean's talked about the fact that over half their cruisers are millennials or younger at this point. um you're gonna have these kind of changes that go with it hand in hand, and so I think it represents, as we're talking about some of these changes, yeah, a lot of it has evolved. The tipping, I think, is more just universal. I don't think that has anything to do with age, but I do believe some of the other things we've been talking about, dress codes, kids, smoking, this is a lot of attitudes that I think reflect the changing age dynamics, and who is going on cruise ships.
No, absolutely. And also, I mean, the other thing with that is that, I definitely think that this is kind of a trend, that's a society trend, that, there's families, and families often, like, that whole families interact with other families a lot, but then there are a lot of adults now that don't have kids, that are just not going to have kids at all. And so that's where you're really starting to see, I think, on all cruise lines, where they're kind of saying, okay, this might be the area where the kids are supposed to go, or where these areas are for families, and then here's an area that's for adults only. Because the people that don't have kids, they've made that a choice, and they want to see that on vacation too. And it also has led to the rise of some of these adult only cruise lines. Like Virgin has had some success with that, in the mainstream market, really marketing to people, saying, hey, come over here if you don't want to be around kids. We are not a family line. And in the more luxury upscale sector, you have Viking doing that too. And I mean, that's kind of nice in that it gives people, like, I like it when they kind of tell people that this is for you and this is for you. Like, these are the spaces where, if you're looking for something that's a little quieter, you can go over here and it will be an adults only. Or if you are looking to have that family vacation, here's a place for you that is fantastic and that everybody will have a great time. So I really think it's this designation of,
Yeah.
like, this area is for you, this area is for you. I think where we always see the issues come up is when things are not defined, you know, and one thing that always gets people going on our boards is the whole kids in hot tubs debate, where there's just, adults think that that's their area to relax, but, like, I've never seen a child that does not love a hot tub,
Yeah.
I mean, they're just drawn like magnets to them. And I mean, I remember I was the same way when I was a kid. It felt cool to go in the hot tub. So you're never going to get away from that. So I think this kind of delineation that the lines are starting to do, say, okay, this area is for adults, these are your hot tubs, this is the area that's the family, expect that you are going to see kids in the hot tub. I think that that's the kind of setting of expectations is really helpful. I think, I mean, one thing that I think was interesting, and that, was the whole swim and tonic, swim up bar, issue that came on the Icon class ships. I know you reported on that first, actually, that, so do you want to talk about that a little bit, about, kind of the debate there with that space?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting ones. I think Royal thought that, for those who aren't aware, there's the Swim and Tonic Bar, which is a swim up bar on Icon and Star of the Seas, and it was made for all ages. And I think Royal Caribbean thought that it would kind of work itself out. Like, kids wouldn't want to hang out there because what are they going to do there? But I think in practice, what happened was a lot of parents were like, "We're going here. You're going to stay right there, and I'm going to drink at this bar." Right? Maybe not exactly that exact wordage, but what ended up happening was that, like, the kids were, I don't know, ruining the vibe. They were just like getting in the way. It's kind of like it hampered it. And they got so much feedback from it that they actually made it an adults only bar space. And that is really interesting to me. I didn't see that one coming. I thought they were just going to be like, well, that's just it is what it is on any given day. It depends on who's actually there. But yeah, it was kind of surprising they went in that direction, I thought, because they've this is the second time now they've kind of rearranged their adult only spaces on that ship to try to cater to the needs of their guests. But it definitely was a surprise. Again, this is Royal Caribbean. This isn't like Celebrity or more of a line that leans more adult. This is a very family focused line with a very family focused ship. So I was a little surprised by that one, but I in retrospect, I mean, I think it does make sense, because if people are using one end of the pool as like the babysitting area and the other side of the pool as the bar, it doesn't really work out that well in practice.
Well, I think, and it goes to show, okay, here's another trend that's come up, these swim up bars, and they're also like hot tubs. Kids want to order things from the swim up bar too. Even, I mean, obviously not alcoholic, but they want to get mocktails, or they want to feel adult and cool sitting at a stool in the water at a bar, right? Like,
Heck yeah.
and I think that as it's kind of showing up in these private destinations that the lines are putting together, Carnival opened Celebration Key, and we've got the Royal Beach Clubs opening, and they are having some swim up bar areas in some of the more family areas, because they're realizing that, you know what, kids are going to be drawn to these just like they are hot tubs. We're going to sell a lot of mocktails, and let's create a space that they can go to.
Yeah, that's really well said. We have time for like one more, and this is we could spend another 30 minutes talking about this one. Loyalty programs. In your opinion, Chris, are loyalty programs better today, or are they better 30 years ago?
Oh geez, I mean, I mean, this is, I mean, our readers certainly think that they've been devalued. For sure, across the board. Every single time there's a change to a loyalty program, somebody is upset somewhere. I think that what's happening clearly is that the cruise lines have seen what the airlines have done, which is loyalty is no longer necessarily based on just your nights that you go, but also on your spend. So they're hoping to get people that spend more. If you spend more for a suite, you're, even if you don't sail as much, you are considered a more maybe valuable customer than somebody who's always taking the interior cabin but maybe sails more often. Same thing that the airlines do, right? Like they prioritize the people that take, shell out for the business class seats rather than the people that are back in basic economy, even if those people are traveling more. So I mean, this is something that, yeah, it's the cruise lines are always going to be looking at how they can maximize the profits. And sometimes that means that people that have been cruising longer are going to feel slighted. Or what the other trend that's happening with this is that, these cruise corporations own multiple lines. And so there's more of this loyalty sharing across brands. Royal Caribbean's had this for a while, where your loyalty from Royal can go to the other lines. And I mean, in some ways that encourages some great traveling things, because for example, like you went on Silver Sea, and I'm not sure, because your loyalty from Royal carries over to Silver
Yep.
Sea. And Norwegian just this week decided to implement that across their lines. The Carnival Corporation hasn't done that yet. So in some ways, it's fun for people that like to switch things up a bit. Like if you have loyalty on Norwegian, what a great way to be able to say, hey, you know what, on my next trip, I want to give Oceania a try, or even Regent. But then what happens is the people sometimes at the more like the ones that feel that they're more exclusive, like at the Silver Seas or the Regents, kind of don't love the fact that, oh, I've been sailing this line for so long, and now a bunch of people with status from what they may perceive as a less expensive line, or certainly it is less expensive in some ways, but they're coming on board now. They're going to ruin my vibe, and they're not. I mean, but it's I think in some ways that part of it is fantastic, that they're allowing people to carry their status through to the other lines and try something new. But then again, I'm somebody who likes to try everything new. I'm not, I don't go on just one line. I go on all of them. And so I love going on different ones, but I can see that if you are somebody who's loyal to Royal and you're seeing, people being prioritized, that haven't put in the nights that you have, I can see where you would be upset.
Well, excellent points. And I also wanted to mention, by the way, the only thing better than maybe if you're feeling a little dejected about all this, like, things were better 30 years ago. I got good news for you. You could win a free cruise because that makes everything better when you can get a free cruise. Talk to us about the Cruise Critics 30 Cruises, 30 Days giveaway. Assuming you're listening to this episode like the week it comes out, because if you're listening to this in a year from now, thank you, but you missed your opportunity. But this is a really cool celebration you guys are doing.
Yeah, this is the biggest contest sweepstakes that Cruise Critic has ever done in our 30 years, and we're really excited about it. We are giving away a cruise every day during the month of October, and the cruise prizes are really wide ranging. It's everything from yesterday or the 2 days ago, we gave away a luxury cruise on Crystal. Yesterday, we gave away a cruise on Celebrity, and it's going to keep going on through the month. Some prizes include a cruise to Antarctica. But then we also have some vouchers for some money that you can book your own cruise. So it really is special to us. You can enter every day. The URL is cruisecritic.com/sweepstakes. And yeah, we're really excited about it. And we see no better way to celebrate our 30 years than giving away cruises.
Fantastic. Well, I'll put a link to the sweepstakes in the show notes for this episode. Chris, always a pleasure. I think we need to probably do a follow up at some point to talk about some of the other things that have changed over the years, because I mean it's always it's a great topic, and I really appreciate you bringing your perspective on it. I just hope that the hate mail goes to you and not to me. But thank you for being here.
Change is inevitable,
Yep.
so it's just the way life goes.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.